Good day. My name is Richard Lowe, and this is Conversations with Influencers. I'm here with George. Can you pronounce that name, George?
Sure, Trujillo.
George Trujillo, who is a data and AI strategist who uses a values-based approach for leading digital transformations. For the last 12 years, he's been focused on architecting or leading data monetization and digital initiatives. Before that, he was the CEO of a professional services and technical training company for 12 years. He's a published author, a contributor to CIO Magazine, and an internationally recognized speaker at CIO CDO events, as well as Oracle, VMware, and Gartner conferences, to name a few. Get ready for our conversation with this digital leader. And before we get into that, I am Richard Lowe, the writing king, and I am a ghostwriter, and I'm also a writing coach and a LinkedIn branding expert. So if you need help with any of those, come see me. All right, George, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, Richard. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm excited to be here. So yeah, I'm an independent digital strategist and practitioner, and what I really do is focus on working with organizations to help them with their digital initiatives and their transformations.
It sounds wonderful. Yeah, back when I was at Trader Joe's, before there was a name for it, I transformed the company digitally a couple of times. We went from paper and printers and literally NCR machines, remember those, to being on a computer, and then we could translate. Then we did a second digital transformation to make that a little more modern, but only at the back end. Interesting enough, we didn't transform the front end. So the customer-facing side never transformed, but the warehouses and the logistics and things, I was in charge of all of that. So I will know what you're talking about. And so how do you have an approach for digital transformation? Why don't you tell me about that?
Yeah, one of the things that I really believe in is using a values-based approach as a leader. And the reason I do that is, one, it's personal, and it's also beneficial to the organization in terms of it's important when you're building a team and your directs to have a shared vision, to have a core common set of values and beliefs that everybody's aligned with. And it's that core set of values that you build where you create alignment and transparency that really builds inspired teams. And part of that is personal beliefs in building a high quality working environment. But part of it is also, whenever I look at organizations that really have incredible digital transformations, that they all seem to be very human-centric focused and seem to inspire their teams and their organization.
I see. So what do you mean by values oriented?
So by values, if you look at, whatever we do in life, a lot of the decisions we make, it's based upon our core values, our morals, and that influences our decisions. So what are the core values that you're building from an organization and you're building within your team and you're defining as part of the business transformation that you're undergoing? So when you can have your team align on these are our core values, you can basically empower them to make more decisions because they understand what those core values are, and they're making decisions and leading teams based upon those core values.
Can you give me for instance of some values that you would have in a digital
Yeah,
transformation
sure.
project?
There's a couple different ones. Is one, in terms of inspiring people. I believe that, with my directs, that they see that I'm invested in their careers. I'm invested in them being more successful and growing. And when I say that to them, then all my actions with them should reflect that. And they see that he really is focused on my career, my skills, my personal development. So that's a core value of caring about your team members. And I expect them to pass that on to the teams that they lead. Or understanding that what we're trying to do in our digital transformation is really accelerate the speed that the business can execute on. And what does that mean? So when organizations and teams are making decisions on technology, on talent that they're bringing in, that they're all aligned in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. And part of those core values kind of sum up to a shared vision that aligns everyone.
I see. Yes. I've actually ghostwritten several books on digital transformation myself. And as I said, I did the one at Trader Joe's. And that was always a big part of everything, was the values that digital transformation doesn't work if you don't go with people first. It's PPP, and people are always first.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
And I spend a lot of time talking to executives and CIOs and CDOs, and you ask them, what is important to you? And you never get very far in a conversation with a C-suite leader when they don't talk about culture and people. So, you need to lead with that. And I've just found that, when we center around a values-based approach, it's an anchor that we can all align to.
I see. So what other things do you do in digital transformation? I know cybersecurity is really hot right now. Is that part of your digital transformation projects?
From my perspective, when I've led projects, it's been very data and AI focused. So in terms of how do we modernize our data strategy? And that leads into what is the data culture that you're building? What does data literacy mean in your organization? How are you achieving data governance and data quality? And so those are just terms, but that leads into how effective an organization is with data. So for example, it doesn't matter how much data you have if people can't discover and find the data. And then second, if once they find the data, can they understand the data? Is there tribal knowledge? Can they see how other people are using that data, how they become effective? So all the things about data governance and building data quality basically need to be part of any data initiative. And so part of the digital, go ahead.
Sorry, it sounds like, I didn't mean to interrupt. It sounds like you'd be breaking down silos in companies doing that.
One of the key factors of success, and one of the key factors that I see that really impacts companies, is for 12 years or more, I've seen whenever there is a very vertical siloed effect, it has massive impacts on the business. And I've seen, as I got deeper and deeper and had more responsibility in data initiatives, the more you work on a horizontal perspective versus vertical, the more you can create impact across an organization. One of the things that I've seen is that the more you can build the standardization across an organization, the more you can have impact across that organization. And the only way you can do that is you have to create an alignment. So I've seen that to be a digital leader, you can't be on one edge or another or in one group. You have to basically be in the middle and support all the different lines of business, and people see that you are in the middle in terms of driving this transformation.
I see. Yes, I did some work for a company that had just digitally transformed, and one of the things they found in their analysis was the silos. They were very heavily siloed by region, and reporting totals didn't add up because they were siloed. So one region would report they sold this many units, and another region would report they sold this many units, and then the central company, the main company, would report this many units, and it didn't add up. That they didn't match. Once they did the digital transformation, that was all centralized, so of course it matched. And that was a big problem to them before the transformation.
Yeah. I think one of the things that, Richard, that I see that really gets missed in terms of the impact of that vertical approach is data is not vertical, even though we think of that way. We think of data as being in silos, in databases or data warehouses or big data, but that's not actually how data works in an organization. Data flows from all kinds of different sources, and through data ingestion, it moves into your organization. And it may reside inside of a database, but then that data can flow into additional data marts or data warehouses. And then people need to integrate and aggregate that data. So if you really look at what makes a healthy ecosystem in terms of generating insights, it's how that data flows through the entire organization. So if you look at data as like a value supply chain throughout an entire organization, the more you have strong vertical silos, the more you inhibit the healthy growth of that data organization.
And that's exactly what this company found, and that's what they worked to resolve, was getting rid of those strong vertical and making it more of a horizontal structure. Of course, they couldn't get rid of the silos entirely, because I guess regions worked very well for them, but they were able to make the data at least be more, I guess the word's homogeneous between all of the various regions. And at the data level, the concept of regions kind of faded away, and it was only just tags and things in the data.
Yeah, and two things that really helped me is you kind of feel things, you've got a gut feeling, But what really brought it home for me is I was working for an organization as a global architect and strategist, and I met with corporate, and they said, we really want you to go out and talk to our customers. And I started talking to the customers, and I'd talk to, directors and managing directors on how their projects and initiatives were going. And I would see green, fantastic, things are going great. And then I'd talk to VPs, and they'd be more like, well, it's kind of maybe a little orange. And then I'd talk to the C-suite, and it would be red. I'm going, wait, it's the same organization.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I seeing three different levels of success? And I realized that when I talk to at the project and use case level, they're looking very vertically. And the higher you go up in an organization, the more they're looking at things horizontally. And as I went out and I spoke to business leaders, I talked to the CMO, VPs and lines of business. I asked a lot of questions in terms of, what are your challenges? What are your issues? What could you do better? If you had X, what could you do more effectively? And the more they addressed their challenges and concerns, the more it came back to, it was an unhealthy data ecosystem in terms of data was being stopped in different silos. It wasn't a healthy flow. So that was just like an epiphany for me. I'm going, of course, how could we do it any differently? And then I had another role where all data reported to my office. And so when you looked at the organization, it wasn't just the databases, the data warehouse, data engineering. It was how data flowed through that ecosystem that really determined the speed that companies could execute to, and just as importantly, the data quality. So all of things have just reinforced that it's the healthy ecosystem that wins, not just picking a technology or building out a silo. And probably the biggest thing that I've seen consistently that doubles down on that approach is that when you have a vertical approach, the success only exists in the vertical silo. It doesn't grow out horizontal.
Yeah, that makes sense. Some of the companies I've looked at as consultant and as writing, they had the problem with these verticals where they also had vertical IT departments. So each vertical had its own IT department, and they were very concerned about losing their jobs and their careers that they'd built, much as if they were doing an acquisition and a merger, which kind of they were. And that's where the people thing comes in. You have to be concerned with the feelings of people, or they can go along and sabotage your project because they don't want to lose their jobs.
Yeah, some advice I got years ago that stayed with me is that an organization cannot move faster than they're comfortable moving towards. And to me, part of that is you've got to get people's buy-in. You've got to educate them. You've got to spend time with them and let them see the importance of this, the business advantage, and get their buy-in. Because, when I work on things from a technical perspective, everybody understands you can have data drift, you can have process drift, and you can have model drift. But to your point, when I see dysfunction, I see strategy drift. And what I mean by that is you might have a strategic initiative, but downstream teams can change that strategy by saying, you know what, we don't have enough resources. We have to pick the old technology because of why, or we're not ready to deal with that. There's too much complexity. And they can basically little by little make decisions that basically start impacting the overall strategy. And I've seen that consistently in companies that are having challenges. And I don't see that in organizations that are being successful, which again is back to your point, is it's about people and you've got to get their buy-in. I've spent the last year and a half spending a lot of time with executives and CIOs and CDOs and at dinners. And when I talk to people at the VP level, one of the things that I hear consistently when I say, what are some of your main challenges? And one of the things I consistently hear is a lack of a shared vision and distributed thinking. And so as you're kind of, I think, highlighting, is getting away from those vertical silos is extremely hard. It's extremely difficult, and it requires a tremendous amount of effort and time to do that. But, I challenge, how do you have an organizational business transformation without addressing that successfully?
Right, right. And I think that becomes a cultural transformation as well as a business transformation. You have to transform the culture before
Yeah.
you can transform the business or the IT. In fact, technology actually comes last in my understanding. You're more concerned about making your business more resilient for the future and for the market rather than focusing on, oh yeah, we can get this great new AR system. Um, that's not the point. The AR system is not the point. Making the business actually work better is the point, and the AR comes at the end, is
Yeah.
my understanding of digital transformation.
Yeah, and coming back to a values-based approach, I also heard from another executive. They said that your people will always want to know how much you care before they want to know how much you know.
That
And
makes sense.
I found that has been really effective in people seeing that you're all in, you're buying into this approach. And it's sometimes it's the intangible things that make the big difference. And that's why sometimes I really try to reemphasize a value-based approach, because it makes sure I stayed anchored on key things that determine success.
Yeah, in fact, in copywriting, which is a form of writing, it's common to know that emotions come first.
Yep.
Facts come way down from emotions. So it's emotions, feelings, and things like that. You sell things based on emotion. You don't sell them based on fact.
Yep.
People emotion, and this works the same way in digital transformation. They're going to be very emotional about change. A lot of people don't like to change. They're afraid, whatever. So you have to start from there. And I've seen several companies that bring in these big outside firms to do the digital transformation, which makes the transformation even harder because the people are really threatened by that,
Yeah. Yes.
because they're going to lose their jobs in their minds.
Yeah, that's a great point, because one of the challenges I see with that, you can bring in outside firms that have a tremendous amount of expertise and experience, but is it educational? Is it tactical? Or is it cultural? And sometimes that culture leadership has to come from within versus an outside organization helping you define your culture. But that's just maybe some of my personal experiences that I've seen in large initiatives.
Yeah, yeah, you might need an outside firm's help to help you with the cultural transformation, but it really needs to come from inside, because the
Yeah,
people are the culture. And if they're not part of transforming their culture, you're not actually transforming your culture. You're
yeah,
forcing something, and that's not going to work. That's going to just breed hostility and make it not work well.
yeah. Agreed.
And something else I've noticed is in here, I've read about like GE's attempt to digitally transform, is you can't bite off everything at once. You have to focus on the important stuff first.
Yeah. It's amazing that the more you study digital transformation, the more you try to be digital savvy. You go look for, where is there inspired leadership, where has there just been incredible success, and what are the patterns and the frameworks and the tools that they use. And whenever I see really, really successful leaders that lead massive digital transformations, they always talk about, as you pointed, of building that education and building that culture in waves and in phases. You can't do it all at once. And not only do you do it in phases, is how are you constantly feeding and nurturing that culture that you're trying to build? I mean, Richard, I can't think of an exception of a really successful digital transformation that didn't use that approach.
And I agree. And I agree. In the writing I've done and in what I've seen, your transformation won't work if you're not changing the culture. It simply doesn't work unless it's very small scale, or unless you're just forcing it down people's throats and they're just accepting it because they've always accepted it. And even then, you're not going to get what you want. You might get something, but
Yep.
you're not going to get a lot of big success. I know we
Yep.
were successful at Trader Joe's because we focused on very small pieces at once. We didn't try and do the whole place at the same time. So we'd focus on the supply chain or the warehousing or the merchandising one at a time. And when we expanded that, the staff became overwhelmed really fast, and
Yep.
they couldn't take it. But when we focused on just the supply chain or part of the supply chain, it became much easier to
Yep.
transform.
Yep. And going back and measuring, are people able to work at the speed that you're trying to get them to? And if you're not, how are you filling those gaps? How are you helping them get there? And so it's just a constant process of nurturing and growing and developing and reskilling. And that's another consistent pattern that I've seen. When organizations take on a massive digital transformation, another successful pattern is finding that balance of bringing in new talent, but also doing a tremendous amount of reskilling of your existing resources and getting their buy-in. And sometimes your challenges can be you've got the new and the old that are kind of at conflict with each other. And so finding projects that integrate them together and get them rowing together in the same boat also start creating impacts. And that's part of, leadership, looking for all those things, and where sometimes it's not a textbook approach. It's how do we grow and develop and nurture the dynamics of that change that we're trying to get to occur within our culture and within the values that drive that culture.
Well, one thing that's very important for leaders who are transforming their business is you have to remember you have that organizational knowledge that if people just leave, you've lost. So you've got somebody who knows your systems inside and out, like I used to, and been there 20 years, like I was. I mean, I knew everything. I knew how it worked. I knew the history. I knew everything. And losing somebody like that, or having them not engaged, can make it very difficult to move forward. Yet integrating them into the process and making them part of the team, even though they're the old school, so to speak, can be very, very useful, especially during the transformation, and afterwards reskill them to work with the new system.
Yeah. And just think the positive impact you have on people that have been in your organization for a long time, that understand the business, that understand the context, that they have the common sense of the business that external technology experts will not have. When they see that the organization's making an investment in them and saying, hey, you're an important part of that journey, how does that uplift everybody in the organization and create positive momentum?
Yes, these are all interesting points about digital transformation that if you've never done it before, you've never been exposed to it, they're not obvious. That you start with people. Most IT people think, oh, we're going to start with technology, obviously, because we love technology as IT people. We love that new super big data drives that's all intelligent and uses AI to put data all over the place. But that's not where you start. That's that's part of the process, but maybe you don't need it. Maybe you need something else. Maybe pencil and paper work best. I mean, for crying out loud, you don't know until you get in there. Or maybe you're focusing on the wrong thing, because you do want to focus on the things that give you the bigger bang and give you the better processes and improve things better, rather than on the small stuff. Maybe trying to optimize people's spreadsheets isn't where you want to start, because maybe that works fine. And optimizing those isn't going to help your business very much. So maybe you want to focus on more of their workflows or something. I'm just making up examples. But it seems you seem like, well, if we want to get rid of all those Excel spreadsheets because they're all different, they're all blah, 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 blah. But is it really causing a problem that you need to solve? And perhaps the answer is no. Maybe it's yes. But look at it from not a technical point of view. Of course, we technicians want to get rid of all those Excel spreadsheets, because they're ugly and they're user maintained, and I got to go in and support the darn thing. But is it really important? Does it matter for the business whether they're using an Excel spreadsheet or a database that's all fancy and what is it called? The big Hoopa, drives and stuff.
Oh, yes.
The Hoodump or whatever it's called, or brand new system. That's something that we had to look at very closely, and we didn't have a lot of resources, so we didn't focus on those little things. We focused on more on the big things, like the supply chain, which was a huge thing, or making the warehouses more efficient. I mean, you've got 45 warehousemen pulling product out of the warehouse all day long. You improve their time by 10 minutes each through the day. You've gained, thousands and thousands of hours through the year. So that's much better than trying to improve some accounting person with their spreadsheet. Not that they're not important, but their spreadsheet may be working fine. So what do you think of all that?
Yeah. I was smiling as you were speaking because I was thinking of that old saying that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. And it's really interesting. I was part of the wave when big data and Hadoop first came out, and everybody rushed to the technology and we'll figure it all out later. And then we had this big wave of web and mobile applications. Let's get these applications up and running and we'll figure it out later. And now we're in the world of generative AI. And once again, everybody's rushing to the shiny new toy, and technology decisions are leading the way. And it's leading to very siloed approaches and the business or bystanders. So it's just amazing that, when I've been tracking for the last 3 years, digital transformations, the rate of success, I was seeing, companies like Bain showing in like 2019 that digital transformations were having like single digits of success rates. And then when you look at, 2023, you see that, it can be up to single digits to the mid 20s of percentage of success rates. And everybody seems to be ignoring the difficulties that organizations have and not addressing, like, only 22% are succeeding. Why are we going to be different? How are we doing it differently?
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to define the direction that we're going in and be successful? What are those gaps that we have to fill in? And I just, part of me, wanting to go out and be an independent strategist again was I just see that organizations are still struggling with that. And, for our companies, our local economies, for our country, we have to become more successful and get better at solving these problems. And some people, I was on the phone today and I was talking to someone that says that, well, generative AI is still just a buzzword, and we'll see what it looks like in 2 years. And I can understand perspective, but I see a number of companies that are getting really tangible, impactful results from generative AI, and I believe it's real. I believe it's here to stay. It's going to have impact, and we've got, as an organization, as an industry, as companies, we've got to help companies be more successful.
Well, I know even me as a writer and a solopreneur, generative AI, ChatGPT, and its offshoots has been a godsend in improving my productivity. Now I don't use it to write because ChatGPT lies too much and it makes really crappy writing, but I use it to help me research, or like take an interview and I tell it, okay, this interview was all over the place. Can you break it down into an outline and make sense for me? That works really well, except for it lies sometimes. So you have to be careful. So it literally added things when I did it when I do it to the transcript that didn't happen in the interview. It's like, where did you get that from? And I asked it that. Where'd you get that from? And it said, oh, sorry. And it did it again without that. It's like, you mean you needed me to tell you were lying?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that's really changed that I'm not sure that, people that aren't deeply involved that are seeing is, that you are correct. That occurs with large language models. But as organizations are building vector databases and they're building their organization's context and intelligence in these vector databases to tune the data that's in these large language models, the information starts becoming more accurate.
Of course.
And I wrote a story from a CIO Magazine article I wrote a couple months ago. And I highlighted that, let's say I wanted to go to a retailer because I wanted to build a deck for my backyard. And I might search on, well, what type of wood, what type of bolts and screws and nuts do I need to get, what type of cement? And I'm doing all these searches to figure it out. Well, if that company that provides those type of resources, if they can use a vector database and build context around their products and how companies use their products, what changes is you now go to their application and their agents and how they've tuned all that information, and you say, you know what, I want to build a deck, and here's my address, and here's the size of it. Can you give me a low cost, a medium, and a bells and whistles solution? And what do I need to know about building that deck? So now with generative AI, it can tell you, if you're building a deck of this size, here's the materials that you need. Here's how long it takes for the finish to dry. Here are local contractors that you may want to use to pour the cement. Here's the type of permits that you have to get to your location. So all of a sudden, it's completely redefined the customer experience. And I think when people, I'm glad you made that point, because sometimes when listeners go to Chat GPT, they're going, I'm getting all these inaccuracies, I'm getting all these hallucinations. They're not seeing how organizations are building out their generative AI capabilities today, and that we're going to see by the end of the year. And I am really looking forward to this this upcoming holiday season to really see what companies are leading in transforming that customer experience, because I think it's going to really surprise people in terms of the positivity and the capabilities of generative AI that I'm not sure everybody's seeing, because it's right now a lot of it is happening under the scenes, and people are growing and building out those capabilities.
Exactly. Yes. For the writing, for example, one of the things that I've found it's really useful for is, okay, I say, ChatGPT, here's this article that I wrote. What did I forget? And it says, well, you should also write about this and this and this and this. And then it says, then who's your audience? Be more specific. So say, okay, my audience is blah, blah, blah. Great. For that audience, you also need to talk about this and this and this. Wow. I mean, that just made me make a better article. It's not writing it for me, but it's doing some of the, helping me with some of the thought processes. I could see the opportunities for AI, like you said, in just the shopping experience being phenomenal. I mean, going in and say buying a new car and saying, okay, I've got this disability, I've got these needs, I have kids, and they're a pain in the butt, and I want to keep them occupied, and etc. And they put together a car for me, and you order a custom car with just the right things that you need for that car. Or I've got older parents that I need to bring to and from medical facilities occasionally. How to say, so we need a lift or whatever. This could all be a game changer, because you don't have to think about it anymore. You can just give it real live instructions, like I would talk to you. This is what I need. Tell me what to do. Da, 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 da. Thank you very much. I'm going to go do that. Or, okay, you got it wrong. I don't need a lift on there. I can't afford it. So can you give me the other options? Well, how about this and this and this? And for medical, oh my Lord, the opportunities in the medical world, I understand it's already producing sometimes better diagnoses than doctors. And that's scary, because it makes me wonder about doctors. But a doctor could certainly use that as an assistant, like a lawyer uses a paralegal. You heard about the lawyer who used ChatGPT? Did you hear that story?
No.
The lawyer actually put together a case and used ChatGPT for research. Turned out ChatGPT lied and gave cases that don't exist. The lawyer actually didn't check it, or his paralegal didn't, and they went before the judge. And the judge, my understanding is, the judge had him sanctioned and disbarred, because you don't do that. You got to check those references. That's what I heard. I'm not positive about the disbarred part, but I know he was sanctioned. So there are real world implications to AI.
Well, and I think that's a really key differentiating point to make, because I think when most people go to Chat GPT, they see a lot of that, but they're not, as I said, seeing underneath the covers of how companies are using vector databases and building intelligence and building memory and building context into how they use their information. That's kind of redefining the capabilities of what generative AI can do. And it's interesting. I'm really trying to just constantly immerse myself in trying to be digital savvy. And when I look at what's going on in generative AI, whenever I go to look at healthcare and what's happening, it's just inspiring to just think of the capabilities that it's going to bring to. And we're talking about the really neat things, but we're not talking about the operational efficiencies that it can bring to hospitals, and not only with patients, with employees. And so I really think that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, in terms of it's so important that we help organizations get this right, because the positive impacts are almost unimaginable.
Yeah, I mean, I just talked a little bit about ChatGPT. Well, the general ChatGPT got its database from scanning the web and Reddit. and a few other places. So of course it's biased.
Yeah.
But these companies, as you pointed out, are using different ways to get their database built, so they can eliminate the biases or at least reduce them. For hospitals and for other places, I see a huge possibility of giving your AI your workflows and having it optimize them, because one thing about hospitals is their workflows are terrible. Just how
Mm.
this person gets moved from here to here to here to here. Oh my Lord. Talk about inefficiency, and just making that more efficient with AI. Wow, you can really improve the productivity of the people and your profits. And
Yeah, and it can be simple things of if we have two patients that go in for the same thing, one had to come back to the hospital 3 days later, the other one never came back. And then you look at, as you said, the workflow of the pattern of how they went through that hospital and what labs, et cetera, they used, and you realize it was completely different patterns that they went through that generated completely different results. And those workflows could just be really impactful with just simple things like that.
yeah, I took a CERT class, survival class, um, for 7 weeks. And one of the things we learned is how to triage people. Well, AI can do that easily. That's something that's AI could do without even thinking about it. Um, and imagine in a mass casualty situation, you have an AI program that triages people and can triage them really fast and really effectively without the emotion built in. So this person needs help more than this person. This person can wait. This person is beyond help, etc. All the things you do in triage. Um, that would be a godsend to a hospital, just that, especially in a
Yeah.
mass casualty situation.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think is really important as an organization and industry as we move in this direction is to have transparency and have honesty and just say, here's where we're at today. Here's where we want to go, and create realistic expectations. Because I'm fine if you don't have all the bells and whistles now, just let me know what you do have and what I can trust. So building
Right.
that trust is critical to any organization's success of what they want to do with generative AI. And that's where I think another thing about generative AI is a lot of it's real time, correct?
Mhm.
Well, one of the biggest challenges is when you make real time decisions, you can't take them back. If
True.
you're deciding whether to close a plant, a valve at a manufacturing plant or not, or you're trying to decide whether to call an ambulance for somebody or not, or you're trying to say, hey, there's warning with this type of situation, you can't take those things back. So you need to be accurate with them, and you have to build that trust. And I think that's where I worry a little bit, because if people don't have the trust as you make it better, it's going to take a tremendous amount of effort to get that trust back.
The first time the trust is broken, like how many times have they tested self-driving cars? And I think one or two have had accidents. Trust is broken. Getting that trust back, I mean, 90% of the people aren't going to touch a self-driving car now, even though out of a million trips, 2 of them had accidents. That's a
Yeah.
pretty low failure rate when you're in the grand scheme of things. Yet it had accidents. The trust is broken. So you've got a problem. It's more of a perception problem than a real problem.
Yeah.
That's going to happen a lot.
And one of the things that I've really become a key advocate for is chief digital officers. And part of the reason is they have to come in and have a horizontal view. They have to come in and understand the business perspective. And here's where I think we can start eliminating a lot of the mistakes of the past, of where we led with technology first, and that type of horizontal view and looking at how we're evolving our organization can just eliminate so many obstacles that impact an organization moving forward. And it doesn't have to be the chief digital officer, but there has to be somebody that has a horizontal view, and they're not leading with technology first.
Exactly. Exactly. I think a chief digital officer, maybe even a chief AI officer, are 2 things that you need in an organization. In addition to this chief security officer and so forth, you need people who understand their parts of the technology and processes and whatever else. Um, I don't know if they have to necessarily report to the board. That's above my pay grade, I think, but they should certainly have responsibility horizontally over the organization rather than vertically.
Yeah.
AI needs to be coordinated in the whole organization as opposed to in each individual vertical.
Yeah, and I think that, when you look at, the different C-suite leaders, the chief digital officer has to be in the center of that. And if the chief digital officer is off on one end, they need to have that executive support and sponsorship to make sure that they get back in the middle.
Well, actually, none of these IT groups, IT CDO, CTO, CFO, CIO, whatever, will work without support of the CEO and the board. They simply won't work, because if they're not built into the goals and objectives of the organization, the strategy, it's anybody can say, hey, you want me to do this AI thing, but I don't see it in my goals for the year.
Yep.
I don't have to do it. And
Yep.
they're perfectly legitimate saying that because it's not in their goals.
Yep.
If my goal doesn't include AI, why are you asking me to do AI? I'm not getting a raise based on that. I mean, let's make it personal, So,
Yeah, an inspiring story was one chief digital officer that she was saying that how it was absolutely critical on day one that you get alignment and sponsorship with the other C-suite leaders. And she gave examples of how human resources put together training to help the organization learn the new culture and the values and why they were doing things, and what the CIO was doing, and the CSO and the CFO, and how they were all supporting that. And you're going, just by that alone, I could see why that was really successful and it worked.
of course. Well, we've been talking for about 45 minutes, and I think we're coming up to the end. Sorry to be so abrupt, but is there anything you'd like to say as we wander off into the distance?
I think just on a final note is when you look at digital transformations, look at it from a business transformation, and how is technology going to enable that business transformation. And if you could just take that one piece of advice, it will help you stay on the yellow brick road.
Very good, and thank you very much. Did you say you've written a book?
I've written a couple books. One was on how to virtualize databases and move into the cloud. And so I'm looking at writing a third book on digital transformation, but I always collect a dream team of different writers to write different pieces, so there's a wide perspective of it. But as I get there, I'll keep you in the loop, Richard.
Well, I understand. I'd like to bring in the author point of view too. So you've written 2 books, and they're on Amazon?
They are both on Amazon, yes.
All right. I'll see if I can find the links to them, put them in the interview. Very good. So this has been Conversations with Influencers. I'm the Writing King, and as I said, I do ghostwriting, book coaching, and LinkedIn branding. So I hope you come back. I'm doing 2 influencers every week. They'll be on YouTube, on my website, and on SoundCloud and other places as well. So come back, like and subscribe. Enjoy this, and I'll talk to you next time.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Hang on.